Right, we're going to continue with our media availability this afternoon with our defending race winner, Regan Smith, driver of the number 7 Ragu Chevrolet for Junior Motorsports. Regan, just talk a little bit about, I was thinking over on my way in this morning that JRM now has 4 wins this season. You winning at Daytona, and then essentially that kind of kicked off a year ago here when you won the race for them. Just talk a little bit about kind of that transition and then just the overall, so to speak, dominance this year so far by the organization.
Well, it's definitely been a work, in progress. I think from when I came in at the end of 2012, the mission was to get the company and the organization to where it could have 3 or however many cars it could win week in and week out. And it certainly has been, as I said, a work in progress. We learned a lot of stuff last year, continued to get speed, understand our cars better, know what we wanted them to do, and that's carried over into this year. And it's it's pretty cool to see that we've got 3 separate teams that have all won races, that have all run up front, and had a level of success so far all season long. I think that's rewarding for all of us that are involved from the top to the bottom. Dale, Kelly, and Mr. H made a lot of some difficult decisions and some decisions that they had to replace and move some people around a couple years back. And for them, I think it's got to be cool to see where it's grown to and where it's going. And it's been because of their leadership and understanding how to put the right people in the right places. And then from that point on, the people that have been doing the work and whether it's the crew chiefs or whatever, the department managers, so on and so forth, it's just been a lot of work that's gone into it, and a lot of thought, and a lot of continuing to grow and get better. I don't think any of us are satisfied where it's at right now. We want to continue to, and that's a sign of an organization that can be strong for years to come, which is what the goal was.
All right, we'll go ahead and take questions for Regan. Okay, we have a pretty good crowd here, so let's go Stan, Al, and then Alan.
Regan, Stan Creekmore with RPMTonight.com. If you will, I want to take you straight into qualifying. Again, you all have 3 teams. According to Sam, that's not going to be enough. Have you all put together a deal yet for qualifying? How many cars do you think it will take to get a speed that will possibly put you on the pole?
I'm sure every team's had these same talks and thought about it and gone through it as to what the best formula to make it happen is. Short of going out there in a pack of 30 cars and you'll see somebody go to the front and then they'll try to drop to the back 5 seconds off the pace, and somebody else have to come through the middle 3, 4 wide, dodging cars inside, outside. Short of doing that, I think you may see some organizations just take their cars and go out there and make sure that we can race our primary cars in the race. I think there's a lot to be said about running the car you unload with when you get here as compared to going out and qualifying and tearing one up in an impound race nonetheless and having to roll a backup out. There's a reason why a backup car is a backup. I don't care what anybody ever says. Whether it's the Nationwide Series, the Cup Series, or whatever, there's a reason that car is in the front of the hauler and the other one's in the back of the hauler, and we unload it first. So we'll see. I mean, I think you're definitely going to see a big pack. Who's in that pack? I can't sit here and tell you for sure right now, but I think you'll see a big pack, and somebody's going to just catch the right break and the right line, and the right cars will be backing up as they're catching a draft off of them at the right time, and that's going to be who gets the pole. But, ultimately we've seen it in these races a lot of times that you don't have to be in the top 10 to win them.
All right, Al, go ahead.
Yeah, Regan, Al Muskie with the Aniston Star here in town. I have 2 questions I wanted to ask you about your circumstance as the defending race champion. Is there any special feeling or obligation that you have coming to a track as the defending race winner? Does it equate to like the guy going to a golf tournament trying to defend his title and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I don't think there is. I mean, you get the same feeling every week you go to the racetrack. You want to win. You want to be up front. You want to do the best for your team and your guys that you can possibly do. So I don't think that feeling changes at all, week in and week out. The only difference is you can come here with the memories of what took place, and it gives you another opportunity. You might not have thought about them in 10, 11 months since it happened. It gives you another opportunity to think back and say, hey, I remember that, and I'd like to duplicate that.
I mean, do you walk tall, or people actually recognize, hey, there's the guy that won it last year, or is it because you run so many races and it seems like so many different guys can win? It was nice you won last year, and it's whoever's going to do it this year. It's not that guy's going to be special because he won it last year. You know what I mean?
Yeah, to a certain extent. I think, folks remember it. You get a lot of people that come to a racetrack that come year in and year out, especially a place like Talladega. It seems like, it's a very loyal fan base here of guys and fans, guys and girls that come and continually come back here, whether it's because of, for whatever reason, maybe it's the closest to their home, maybe it's because of the boulevard. Maybe there's a lot of reasons. Obviously, the racing is great, and the product on the racetrack is great here. So, I'm sure those folks remember it and notice it. And short of people saying, "Hey, congrats last year, can you do it again?" It's a new week, it's a new race, and you got to focus on that one.
And then lastly, kind of along those lines, which do you think is harder in this sport? Winning back-to-back races on successive weeks, or defending at a track that you won at last year?
Man, that's a good question. They're both pretty hard. I think defending wins at a super speedway is probably a very tough thing, just because of all the circumstances that can surround it and the things that can be out of your control, as we all talk about. But with that said, it's tough to go to two completely different racetracks and win as well. I haven't been able to do it in my career yet, so I'd certainly like to do that at some point. But in order to do that, I got to win one to win the second one. So we'll focus on the first one this weekend.
Okay, Alan?
Alan Cavano, NASCAR.com. We come to these plate tracks, and it always seems, people, like, it could be a crapshoot. Anybody could win, but you seem to be pretty good at these tracks, and you got 2 wins recently. So is it as random as we think it is, or is there a skill to it?
Well, I think there's definitely a randomness to it. There's situations that are unavoidable sometimes. The difference is an unavoidable situation here affects 10 cars, whereas at another track, it only might affect 1 or 2 cars and not 10 of them. So your odds are a lot greater in getting caught up in something or being involved in something that you were not even near when it happened. There is a technique to this racing too, and I think you have some guys that, and obviously we all understand it, know it, work with it, and try to use it to our best advantage. But I think, some guys come into it with a lot more open mind. I enjoy coming to Daytona, Talladega. I don't come to these places and think, oh man, we got to go race, we got to go draft, we got to go be in a big pack. I look at it as a challenge. I look at it as, okay, mentally I've got to do things a little different this weekend, and I've got to be one move ahead of my competitors, whatever their move's going to be. I got to be thinking that far down the road before it even gets there and before it happens, and I like that. I like that style racing where you're constantly thinking, and there's always something going on that you're having to calculate in your head. So yeah, there's certainly that aspect to it, and there are cars that are just faster and seem to be able to. Some guys get caught in the middle of the pack and they can't get out of it. Some guys get caught in the middle of the pack and they can still make moves and go forward and get back to the front. And, I've been fortunate to have a lot of good cars at the speedway races, and, accompany that with the fact that I enjoy the style of racing, whether it's tandems, whether it's the type that we're doing right now without the tandems, or whatever it might be. And it just, it's worked out well.
Okay, come up front for Dustin Long.
Dustin Long, MRN.com. A couple questions. First off, about a quarter of the field here this weekend has not raced in Nationwide at this track.
You noticed that too, huh? Yeah, I saw that.
Certainly some of them competed at Daytona, but not all of them. What kind of concerns or what kind of advice do you give? What kind of issues does that present with potentially so many? And I understand some of them probably will not be in the lead pack, but some of them being out there, and what you have to deal with is the first question.
Well, I think most everybody that's out here has raced, at some point this year or some point in other series, whether it's trucks or Nationwide or whatever it may be. So everybody that's going to be racing more than likely has some experience speedway racing. So that helps out. They understand going into it what their surroundings are going to feel like. That it's not anything like what we do week in and week out, other than maybe restarts, which kind of have a similar feel to a speedway race here as of late. But that helps a little bit. I think for me, the toughest part is remembering who's in what car. You know, I might come up on one car and think it's somebody and realize it's somebody totally different. I just started figuring out this year who was in each car, you know, week in and week out. So that's probably the tougher part than anything. But, you know, you'll pay a little bit of attention to it. If you see somebody that you're not familiar with really dicing it up and doing something that's a little questionable, you might get out of it, get out of the pack, depending on positionally where you're at or what's going on around you. I know I did that at Daytona a couple times. I got taken, or not taken to the back, but I got in the back early on in the race. And rather than, you know, pushing hard, I saw some things that I was kind of wondering, you know, number one, I still didn't know who was in each car at that point. Number two, I was seeing some things I didn't like, and I just opted to stay back there and cruise for a minute and wait until it thinned out just a little bit. So, you know, it plays into your strategy of you know, when you make your move, how you make your move. And with that said, you're still in, even if you're in the back and you're cruising around, you're still trying to learn your car, understand your car, know what situations you can put it in, you know, to get it back to the front.
And having won 2 of the last 3 plate races, you know, people just kind of clump those together. But obviously each race is different, even at the plate track. So how were you challenged, or what did you have to do at the end, how that compared with what you had to do here and what you had to do at Daytona? I mean, how different were those, or was it similar situations that pushed you in a way to win? Because my assumption is that the wins are, people look at the wins as being the same, but they probably aren't from your vantage point.
Yeah, they couldn't be more different, to be just perfectly honest about it. And the reason for that is because of the change of the rules during the off season. You know, when we were here in last spring, we were tandem, we were pushing still. You know, worked with different guys throughout the day. I worked with, I think, Sam at one point, Brad at one point, Casey, Brian, Scott. I mean, you go on down through the list, there's probably 10 cars that I worked with throughout the course of the day, and was just in a situation at the end where I had Casey behind me and knew, you know, that he was going to be committed to sticking with me, and we were able to get a big run. Now, once we got that run, you know, the move that you do with that run is kind of what determines how the outcome is. And my hand was forced when, you know, they went to block it, and I was either going to go to the bottom or we were going to wreck, and, you know, still took a chance of wrecking when I went to the bottom, but it all worked out fine, and it looked really cool on TV. So that was good. Daytona was a completely different set of circumstances, and the racing was completely different. I think we all saw that it was a bigger pack. Everybody was, you know, 2 and occasionally 3 wide, depending on where you were. But the entire day, you had 30 cars in that pack minimum, and it was a lot more difficult to maneuver yourself to the front than what it was, you know, a year ago here. And you couldn't fall back to 20th and be okay with it, especially when we got down to the last 20 laps of the race. You had to position yourself, and you had to be where you wanted to be going into those last 20 laps, you know, positionally, or otherwise you might not get there. And you know, the side draft and the I don't know if I want to call it bump drafting or slam drafting or whatever it is that we do now, but the bump drafting played a huge part in that. And you know, I anticipate seeing a similar race on Saturday, like what we saw at Daytona. The only thing that's a question mark in my head is if it gets more 3 wide because of how this track is and you know, some of the differences with the corners and the handling characteristics of the cars.
Okay, well, we'll go take a question from Kelly and then Chris.
Kelly Crandall from Popular Speed. Regan, we've always had drivers who have despised plate racing and made it known, and we went through the years of every time we were at Daytona and Talladega, it was 15 cars, 20 cars, whatever it may be. And then it seemed like the last few years, however, there's been drivers more vocal, and it seems like now there's a bigger group of drivers who'd say, you know, we just want to survive, we you know, I don't like plate racing, and so forth. And it seems like in a way the racing has perhaps, and many might disagree with me, but perhaps calmed down. There's more drivers in the back, and things don't get crazy until the end. Has that been something you've noticed? Has that been something that maybe drivers have talked about, or has the racing changed from your standpoint?
I think that, you know, maybe the past 2 years, yeah, maybe it's 2, 3, 4 years, whatever. It's adjusted a little bit because of points and things like that, guys. And in particular, when it comes chase time, guys, they can't afford to give up that big chunk of points and so they opt to go back and play it a little bit safe for a little while. The difference this year is the points really don't matter. You know, they don't, and I know we talk about it so much week in and week out, in particular on the Cup Series, but they don't matter on the Cup Series. So you're going to see that race be wilder and crazier because guys have a little bit more risk that they can take in trying to get that win. And this is certainly a race that's an opportunity race for, maybe a team that just doesn't quite have the funding or the speed week in and week out of some of the big teams. So that's gonna adjust the race in some naturally. I think we saw that it did at Daytona. Once it got dark out after the rain delay, I don't remember how long it was or whatever, but once it got dark out, that race was insane. I think it was one of the best races I've seen in a long time. And it's going to be the same here. The nationwide stuff's a little bit different because you got so many different, maybe it's the guys that we talked about who haven't raced here before that are in cars that they're not always in and week out trying to prove themselves. Maybe it's, guys like myself, Chase, Elliott, Sadler, who are just trying to get as many points as we can get. And there's going to be a lot of different thought process there of, okay, do I just try to get to the front and lead laps and get that bonus point, or do I play it safe? But as I just talked about, you can't really afford to play it safe because you can't get back to the front. And if that wreck doesn't happen that you think you're going to avoid, coming down to 10, 5, whatever it is to go, you could find yourself finishing 25th and not doing anything wrong other than trying to be too safe about it. So I think we're going through a little transition phase with it right now, and I think that's going to continue.
We'll take our final question from Chris.
Chris Knight, NASCAR Wire Service. Regan, Chase Elliott made his ARCA debut here at Daytona and then ran the nationwide race at Daytona. Just wondering your comfort level of working with him, and we work with him in practice to see how you guys might be able to work together in the race, and is there any concern, despite his inexperience, about working with him this weekend?
Well, he's won 2 out of the past 3 races, so I don't think his inexperience is really a factor at all. Chase is a very talented race car driver, and he was fine at Daytona. I'd work with him at Daytona. I'd work with him here. Hell, I'd have worked with him last year if he ran here. It just really didn't matter. His car control and what he understands about the racing is far beyond any other 18-year-old that I've ever seen, and far beyond any, in my opinion, any 18-year-olds that are racing right now. He's years ahead of guys like that, and we'll work together. We'd love to see a JRM 1-2-3 on Saturday, and having Casey out there is going to be great as well. And I think we were able to 1-2 last year here, so maybe we can do a little better.